A couple of weeks ago, I bought Animal Man Volume 4. This book contains the complete run of Peter Milligan's run on Animal Man, which came immediately after Grant Morrison's run. And then it contains the beginning of Tom Veicht's run on this title. I don't know how long Veicht was on the book, but I do believe that Volume 5, which is set to come out in 2014, will have more of Veicht's run. A commenter on the haul video where I showed this book asked if I would be reviewing this book, and I decided that was a good idea. While reading it, I was thinking at first that I would go ahead and reread all of Grant Morrison's run, which is collected in 3 volumes, and then review those volumes before hitting up this volume. However, after I finished this book, I realized that there's not a whole lot in this book that has anything to do with Grant Morrison's run. So I can still go ahead and review this book, and then later, if I want to, I can go and review Grant Morrison's run. But I wanted to go ahead and get this review out there since it was requested, and reading and reviewing Grant Morrison's run would have taken a lot of time that would have delayed this video. The first half of this book is written by Peter Milligan, and honestly it's probably my least favorite part of this book. The book opens with Buddy Baker, Animal Man, coming out of a coma, and he quickly finds that everything in his world has changed. His wife acts subtly different, his daughter doesn't recognize him at all, the President of the United States is different, certain celebrities who are supposed to be dead are in fact alive, and even historical events that happened the way he knew them to happen did not happen in that way. In addition to all of these historical changes to his world, his powers are also kinda going out of control, and so he has to deal with all of this, and it's just a little out of his league. One thing I do like about this is that anytime Animal Man has a problem with his powers, he really doesn't have anyone there to help him. I mean, you have someone like Peter Parker, he's a scientist, and he knows where he got his powers, so if something goes wrong with his powers, he can just kind of figure it out himself. Or, worst case scenario, he can go and find someone else who is also fairly smart, and they can help him figure it out. With Animal Man, I'm not even sure if he knows where he got his powers. I'm sure someone out there knows where he did, but since I only read the Grant Morrison stuff forward, I have no idea what his origin story is. But I really do like the idea that Animal Man is just kind of there doing his thing the best that he can do. Outside of this kind of everyman quality that Buddy has, this 6-issue story kind of feels pointless by the time you get to the end of it. You realize that Buddy is living in an alternate universe, and the rest of the story is basically him just trying to get back home. So anything that he does here just kind of feels like a waste of time and is filler until he does get back home. So when he fights these 3 triplets with weird superpowers, all I'm thinking is that Peter Milligan is just trying to fill up space until he gets to the part where Buddy gets home. As for why Buddy is stuck in this alternate dimension, the reason is kind of stupid, and I won't get into it here because there's really no need. One thing I do find interesting about this book is that unlike most things that I review, I didn't really feel the need to do a full-on spoiler review. Usually when I review something, I'm talking about specific things that I liked or disliked. With this book, there are, well, not a whole lot of things that I really liked enough to talk about the spoilers, and there's not very many things that I really hated enough to talk about the spoilers either. I'm not saying that this is a bad book or even a middle-of-the-road book. I enjoyed quite a bit of it, but it's one of those things where I can read this and I can say, well, there's no reason to really do any spoilers in that review. So if this review feels very vague, well, that's why. One thing I found a little distracting about Peter Milligan's run was his need to kind of, if I can coin a word, out-Morrison Grant Morrison on his own run on Animal Man. There's one character here, Nowhere Man, who talks in the complete gibberish that takes at least a full minute to understand what he's saying. And honestly, anytime this character is talking, instead of just trying to figure out what he's saying, I usually just skip over what he's saying, because I can't be bothered to spend twice as much time trying to figure out what he's trying to say when I could just get to the next character and find out what they're saying. I shouldn't have to spend so much time just trying to understand simple things that a character is saying, like, I have to use the restroom. In a lot of ways, even though Grant Morrison is a very out there writer a lot of times, I think Animal Man is one of his most grounded books. I'm not really sure why Peter Milligan thought that he had to have a character who speaks in William Burroughs language or whatever, and really, I don't think it added anything to this book. It was just a distraction for me. Honestly, this Nowhere Man would have fit in much more in Doom Patrol rather than Animal Man. Outside of that, this 6-issue run by Peter Milligan really does just kind of feel like it's wasting space. I like Peter Milligan's work on some other titles, and I think if he had maybe had another idea other than Animal Man is stuck in another dimension, then he could have done some really interesting work on this title. But, as is, I just didn't really find myself very much engaged by this half of the book. The second half of the book is written by Tom Veidt, and this half basically is kind of doing what Peter Milligan's run did, but in a more grounded way. Instead of Buddy being trapped in an alternate dimension, this stuff here is just dealing with Buddy dealing with his powers going out of whack, which, if you recall, was also something that was going on in Peter Milligan's run. I don't begrudge Tom Veidt for doing this because he takes a lot of time to really explore Animal Man's powers and show kind of how they work. Before, I always just took it for granted. Animal Man sees a coyote, he takes coyote powers, and that's it. But here, it really shows kind of the process, which ordinarily I wouldn't really think I would need the process of how Animal Man takes flight or whatever. But Tom Veidt makes it pretty interesting. This stuff in the second half of the book also feels a little bit more grounded than what Peter Milligan was trying to do, and in short, it also feels a little bit more true to what Grant Morrison did in the previous 3 volumes. Now, I'm not saying that Grant Morrison's way of doing this series is the only way of doing this series, but let's be honest, nobody really cared about Animal Man before Grant Morrison was writing this series, and now, well, the only reason we have an Animal Man series or these reprints of older Animal Man comics is because of Grant Morrison's success on the title. So if you're going to emulate someone, well, Grant Morrison is the one that you're going to want to do it with. One thing I did feel like I missed in this part of the book was the kind of superhero stuff that we did get in Peter Milligan's run and in Grant Morrison's run. Grant Morrison had this really great way of balancing the everyman life of Buddy Baker with the superhero adventures that we saw, like when he fought Mirror Master or when he went back in time. All of this is kind of missing in this half of the book, and that's a shame because I really do think that Tom Veidt could handle it very well. But for 6 issues or so, we really don't get to see him doing anything superheroic. He's just kind of doing his job, which also is very interesting. I just wish we could have had a little bit more of him fighting some bad guys or something. I mentioned that Buddy is doing his job here, and that's a very interesting part of this book. When you have a character like Animal Man who's got a fairly unique power, it's interesting to see how he would use this in his real life outside of just fighting bad guys. And Tom Veidt comes up with a very interesting way that he would use it and kind of support his family with his powers. In Tom Veidt's run, Animal Man has become a stuntman, and that's very interesting. I don't think I would have ever thought to use Animal Man's powers in that way, and like I said, this stuff is all very good. I just wish we could have had a little bit more of Buddy doing superhero stuff, since for like half a year of this title, we don't really have any of that. At the end of the day, this review may sound very choppy and vague, and that's because, like I said earlier, I really don't feel like I need to spoil anything with this book. So I'm trying to be as vague as possible so that if you like what you're hearing in this video, you may go and pick up this book. Don't get your hopes up. I don't think this is as good as Grant Morrison's run, but it's pretty good, and I look forward to seeing the rest of Tom Veidt's run next year. As for other books featuring Animal Man, I do own The Last Days of Animal Man, written by Jerry Conway, and I have the first volume of Animal Man from the New 52, written by Jeff Lemire. So I will try to review those on down the line because I'm in an Animal Man mood now. So anyway, I hope this review wasn't too scatterbrained for you, and if it wasn't, I hope you will like, share, comment, and subscribe. And until then, I will see you guys tomorrow with some other kind of video. I'll see you then.